first off, I'm going to pass the microphone off to Rooster and let him go at it. So I'll be the fearless moderator. If they start talking about trees or birds or cars or something, I'll cut them off and get us back on track. And I'm also going to cut anybody off in the audience if you get into this big Microsoft versus Unix war. You guys take that downstairs. We've all heard that. Okay, you first, Ray.
Alright, my name's Raymond Forbes, and specifically I actually work for Microsoft. So I am the security program manager for Internet Explorer. And I guess being in my field, very funny. With these responsibilities, the biggest hacks that I've seen come out are going to be your client side, especially considering how the browser is unfortunately integrated with the operating system. So people are using the browser to gain access to the hard drive. That and people bypassing the newer encryption technologies, SSL, basically finding faults in the products themselves to actually bypass these encryption protocols that we make.
Hi, my name is J.D. Glosser, and I'm a professional banker. And I completely disagree with Ray. I think the biggest new things in security is just going to continue to be server vulnerabilities, applications running on servers, and it's just getting worse. I don't see anything getting better. Another trend that I see in the security industry is I've been involved in something called a honeynet, and that's some pretty good stories. But I see a lot of other people starting to form their own honeynets and collecting data and starting to use that. So I think that would be a pretty important trend for us to collect data.
Oh, and you also work on rootkit. You seen any future rootkit stuff?
I don't know. I haven't been paying much attention to that. I heard some questions kind of going around. I haven't actually really been involved in it for like the past 6 months, and Greg had kind of stopped developing that for a while. But if interest in using it,
yeah,
there could be.
My name is Ofir Arkin. I define myself as an RFC reader. Basically, a friend of mine suggested that definition, and I embraced that. I think that we'll see both client-side and server-side problems pretty much along all history, and we'll see that in the future as well. I think that client-side will be much more problematic to handle because practically one of the rules written in the book Jeff just sent to someone is there is no client-side security real. I'm doing a bit of research about scanning, fingerprinting. In my field, I think that more distributed scanning, undetected scans, kind of distributed and out of service way of handling scanning, not flooding. It will be harder for intrusion detection systems to really correlate information and understand what goes on. There are lots of stuff that we can research about that. Lots of stuff haven't been out yet. I think it will be fun.
Okay, I'm Job Haas. I have a cold. What do I think about future trends hacking? Well, I think mainly that hacking is going to hurt a lot more, meaning that financial and other damage by hacking is going to increase. Hurtingly. And for the rest, of course, a big increase in kernel.
Of course.
Alright, I'm Halvar, and I'm a reverse engineer, and I think I'd have to lie if I knew what was going on in security within the next few years. But I think there will still be a lot of bad code, there will still be format string problems, and there will be a huge surge in distributed systems like, cell systems which don't only route hierarchically the information but distribute it like decentralized fashion. Other than that, I think there will be a lot of holes and still a lot of work for me until everybody switches over to some secure programming language.
That's not the old life.
Jasper?
Well, I don't know what's going to happen in hacking, but I do know what's going to happen in the law, and that is that we're going to have more and more criminal laws to deal with hacking. And I think that we should be concerned that hacking's not just for criminals, but is something that legitimate computer security people can do to promote the security of the network overall. And that is why I encourage everybody to write to their representatives and write to the Council of Europe about the things I talked about earlier today.
Okay, let me see if this works. Right on. Okay,
Jeff, can I add something?
yes, go ahead.
Nobody has been spoken about mobile phones. This is going to be really fun because if you think about web and push technology, then let's do a denial of service on some mobile phones. I know that there is a denial of service on Nokia's new web phones. Pretty neat, can handle more than, if I'm not mistaken, 256 characters as a HTTP website, so it crashes. I think much of the new stuff or the old stuff would be put against mobile phones again, and it would be easier to do denial of service and other stuff on mobile phones than we think.
Pull that wire out.
Yeah, unplug that from the microphone. Okay, yeah, where it's attached, just can you unplug that?
Where?
Unplug it from the, there we go. Ah, very good. Sorry about that. So, okay, so what I see is kind of the future of hacking here. These guys know a lot more about specific technologies than I ever will. I've turned into sort of a generalist over the years. But the trends I see tend to be more passive tools that you can passively monitor a network with and not give yourself away. I see a lot of people talking about implementing agents to do all kinds of nefarious things, and you sort of are starting to see the first iteration of this with all these zombie DDoS agents. I think that's the first thing. Then all of a sudden the DDoS agents started talking to each other in an encrypted format. I think it'll just continue down this road as they become more and more sophisticated. JD knows this story because he was there, but at the Singapore show, Caesar and Bats talked a lot about distributed agents. And after they finished painting this really scary picture about how all these agents can act autonomously and download code to exploit vulnerabilities that another agent has identified on the target, one of the attendees came up and said, yeah, you know, I saw that system last year in the United States, from the United States government. So if we're thinking about these agents now, apparently somebody in the DoD has already been working on agents, so it's got a lot of people's attention. Rootkits, as you can tell, rootkit.com or kernel loadable module work. I think the more people know about it, the more people will work on it, and it'll just become more and more sophisticated. So those trends I see is increasing. And I also see more attacks against switches, hubs, routers. These attacks have been around for a long time, but for some reason they're becoming more popular and sexy. And the one I point to is against switches, where switches were meant to segment traffic and increase performance, but for some reason the side benefit is it helps against sniffing in your environment. So all of a sudden everybody's putting switches in, and remember that switches are network objects, they're not security devices, and the side security benefit is not intended, it's sort of like a fringe benefit of what a switch does. And so there's attacks against like the spanning tree protocol used on some switches, broadcast scanning. There's other things that people are starting to explore on switches to bypass some of the inherent security benefits that they give you. Also routers, I'm waiting for somebody to do this, but the source code to iOS has been floating around since for as long as I can remember. I mean, everybody's used to or still does swap iOS source, and somebody sooner or later is going to build an iOS Trojan, and they're just going to bust into a router, they're going to flash the switch with their own copy of iOS, and you're never going to be able to get rid of it. They'll write it to the PROM, and they'll boot the router, and you're going to have to buy a whole new PROM to get this thing out of router memory at some point, I think.
Have you ever seen the iOS code?
Yeah, and apparently it's
really
nasty.
nasty.
Yeah. That's why nobody's done it yet, but some people have. It's much like hacking on Windows code.
It's the biggest spaghetti code I've ever seen in my life. It's just amazing.
Number 2 after Linux?
Microsoft.
Oh, Microsoft, yeah. And then I see more trends in reverse engineering, like what Halvar and Joey is working on. And it reminds me back to the days of the crackers who removed copy protection back in the Wares days. Like, no form of copy protection nowadays, no matter how sophisticated it is, seems to stand for more than a couple of days. And I think when all these efforts to make reverse engineering illegal, it'll just give a boost to these guys that will no longer need source access. They can reverse engineer off no source access, it seems like. So I think all those trends are going to continue. The one story I wanted to say was on the network attacks. Does anybody remember the old trick? I never did it, but a lot of my friends, would, when they were in universities, they would store all their tools on the network printer's spool drive. And so they never had any of their tools on their local drive. It was all sitting as a PostScript file in the printer spool that was marked not to be deleted. And apparently there's a trick with distributed.net. Speaking of distributed.net, there was a client somebody wrote that will run on your HP Jet Direct card. So, because it's got a full IP stack, and the printer's pretty powerful, a lot of CPU power, but it's only used a small portion of the time. So when it's not printing, it's cracking blocks. Can you imagine, instead of being a distributed.net client, it sits there and sniffs network traffic and then sends you the results as a big, maybe it prints it out for you. So, I mean, these are a lot of unexplored areas, and I think more people will get into it. So that's my bit. So if the panel has anything they want to comment on there, we can open it up to questions and answers.
One more thing. I think that we will see also more retaliation programs. The one that you mentioned, the BAS project, which have been running from various boxes on the internet. One of its boxes was rooted in 8 seconds. It was. I think that we'll be seeing that a lot in the next coming month, not the future.
I think one more thing to add that you're going to see more of, something that Bruce Schneier actually brought up that was interesting, is you're seeing a lot of new types of clients and servers coming out, game servers, things like this. And we're going to see a lot of attacks against these. Basic ones that we've solved in all the other kind of servers, now we can make again in game servers and media servers and streaming servers.
I think Marcus Raynham made the point that for a lot of security sysadmins, you think you've got your network under control, and then you wake up and there's like 50 million ICQ users and 20 million Napster users, and now you have a whole new nightmare. And people were programming this stuff up in their garage, and they don't have a security coding background, but now it's like a network imperative that you support ICQ. So I think a lot of protocols are going to blindside us that way. Speaking about retaliatory tools, when I worked for secure computing for a while in the professional services group, and they make this firewall called Sidewinder. I don't know if any of you have heard of it, but Sidewinder is a pretty badass firewall. The Air Force threw out 80-something checkpoints, and now they use Sidewinder exclusively. Well, anyway, it has this feature called Strike Back. And you can guess what that does. And over the years, it's been toned down more and more because of concerns about liability. Well, all the functionality is still in there, and if you can write C or Perl scripts, you can have Strikeback do whatever you code it up to do. Well, when I first got to secure computing, I wanted all the cool Strikeback scripts, and they said, "Oh no, we don't have them. The people who've got them are the Colombians." And apparently, the Colombians showed up in our South America sales office with like a suitcase full of cash, and it's like, "Here's the money. Give me the Sidewinder." Well, it takes an engineer 2 days to install, and we can configure it. No. Here's the money, give me the Sidewinder. And so we give them the box, and about a year later, they gave us back a disk, and they said, here are our attack scripts. And you look at these things, and they coded up, all they were massive denial of service retaliatory attacks. It's like if anybody even looked at their box, this thing committed so many illegal violations attacking you back. So I think, legitimate companies may not be doing that for fear of litigation, but I think a lot of people who don't care.
Really don't care.
Yeah, really don't care. I'm into it. Okay, so that's my bit. I'm going to open it up to questions and answers, and I'm going to let them pretty much run with it. So, sir.
I have one thing to add, and if I'm off topic, please correct me, but I think procedural hacking, e-commerce hacking will
go far and far. We look at all systems connected, information flows through those systems, even abiding local security policies. Think of a script hacking procedures within Amazon and mailing some friend 10,000 books.
Wow.
Hey,
Jennifer, have you seen any legal prosecutions for people who've done that? Like, I mean, any of your clients that you may or may not know of?
His comment was
Social
about
engineering?
e-commerce hacking and doing something which would enable you to hack through like Amazon.com and sending your friend 10,000 books or something of that nature, sort of the digital version of ordering a bunch of pizzas to the person's house. And, I haven't seen that so much.
Were you meaning procedurally, like social engineering your way through?
No,
Regardless
social
of the
engineering.
technology?
When you look at how information flows through all those systems, you can construct ways of attacking those systems by using normal traffic, which passes through, but using the procedures that are used in the company, flows through to financial administration and logistics and just flows through the company in a legitimate way, but misuses the procedures internal of the customer, of the client and everything.
Well, one thing that I have seen, he's talking about using the way that the e-commerce website works in its normal, legitimate way, but with enough knowledge about how it works behind the scenes that you are actually misusing it and ending up with a result that they didn't intend. Is that a fair summary of what you said? And I have seen that actually, and I have seen litigation about that. This is a case called the Bidder's Edge, in which is BIDDERS, and it was a company that was a competitor to eBay and other auction companies. And what they did basically was have a sort of a robot go and mine auction companies' websites for the best of the auctions, and then collect them onto their website so that you could see, what's the best of all the Yahoo, eBay, other auctions out there, and just go right to, the meat of the things. So you don't have to filter through all that, those porcelain statues or whatever it is that people really don't want from eBay. And eBay, of course, I'm sorry for all you porcelain statue collectors out there, I didn't mean anything personal. eBay got mad because obviously they wanted the auction purchasing traffic to come to them. And it wasn't that Bidder's Edge did anything really that a normal user couldn't do. I mean, I would do the same thing if I went through all the auctions and filtered it out. It's just that they just use a script or a robot to do it instead of doing it themselves. But because they ended up having this end result that eBay didn't like, eBay sued them. And one of the grounds for their suit was a trespass theory. That they had opened their site to public access for a specific purpose, which was to buy stuff from eBay on the auctions, not to mine it for information to put on your own website. And they actually prevailed in the district court on that trespass theory. So they're using it in the way in which it was intended, but because they understand how it works, they're basically grabbing huge amounts of data and putting it to some other use. And with some creative legal thinking, eBay's attorneys were able to shut Bidder's Edge down and stop them from that kind of thing. So, I mean, those sort of circumstances, yes, there's sort of these novel ways of looking at the law and applying it to these circumstances so that even though the e-commerce system is ripe for abuse, they can stop their competitors or users from abusing it.
Next question. Sir?
I don't go far because I don't think it's a topic of discussion, but it's to complete what you said about new type of attacks between computer. It's information attack, information attack, and not computer attacks. I mean, you can use information systems to do some attacks against companies with legal rules of using computers. I mean, example, on eBay, there are a lot of people who are auctioning against their own products to make the price grow. We have much more dangerous attacks, just like the Emulex case this summer. A student publishing some information on Wire, reflected on Bloomberg, $14 billion down.
I guess I don't want to stop your question, but these seem to be all financially oriented computer criminal type questions, and I want to kind of keep the focus more on technical or more on non-money-making techniques. So, sir?
Yeah, within the last year, we've seen a massive increase of attacks directly exploiting HTML emails. And, well, do you see a trend there? What companies will like to introduce or implement there?
You guys want to go down the line?
Well, thank you. Yeah, we're seeing a trend there. So I have to say it does not help with, it's an interesting functionality versus security, as it's always been. HTML email looks really pretty. It's so neat. And it also allows people to run scripts in the middle of their mail. And the whole concept of the what was it, the good news virus, the original hoax of you open up this mail and all of a sudden you're infected. Well, it was a hoax and now it's for real. I mean, we have viruses where if you just open up the message, you're infected. And I think companies are trying more and more to try to block that kind of thing. And I personally think they're going about it the wrong way. Doing things like blocking certain types of scripts, that doesn't really seem to cut it. I mean, I'm really thinking that, in my personal opinion, signatures, verification of signatures is really the way to go. That's really the way that they should solve this.
JD, anybody?
Well, those HTML attacks fall under the category of client-side attacks anyway. And as we all know, client-side code is most of the time incredibly bad. And there are a lot of, well, clients which just have not been exploited on a large scale by a virus or something like a worm, because they are so diverse. I mean, there are so many versions of the Windows version of ICQ floating around that it would be very tough to write a stable overflow exploit for it, which could be used in a worm in a stable way. Other than that, there's a lot of well, there's just a lot of bad client-side code going on, and it's definitely a trend that will be more the target of exploitation in the future, especially since if many people rely on firewalls for protection of the network, you have to get one foot into the door first, and then you can build a tunnel to the outside in some fashion, and then work from there. So client-side attacks will be very valuable when it comes to first getting into a network, and then you can, well, start scanning from the inside of the network and start spreading in there. Well, that could be a place where distributed techniques can come in again. So,
Sir in the back, the glasses.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on the point about signing the email messages. In the absence of a universal PKI, how does that help? I think I missed
You're right. I mean, that's the problem, is that there's no way at this time, like, there's no universal. I mean, it'd have to really be tied in with like VeriSign or the way we real sign, like we real sign things that we put on the internet right now. I mean, how many people would actually install something that wasn't signed? That seems kind of crazy nowadays, because every time I've seen something that wasn't signed, it carried a virus with it.
Oh, you mean like a SSH install script or something?
Yeah, exactly. You know, an application you find on the web, you know, just click on it, pops up a signature saying this was sent to you by this company.
I just want to make a comment about PKI and just say that the flip side of that, of PKI and its authentication abilities, is the lack of anonymity that it ensures. And I think that while I may not want to install some program that might not be signed, I, especially as a lawyer, definitely want to be able to get anonymous emails. Sometimes that's the most important way for people to communicate with you. So depending solely upon having something that's, you know, where you know who it's from is simply not going to work.
You're not going to send like scripts up anonymously.
Well, I don't know what it is, right? Because if I just open my email and it's got a script in it, you know, what do I know? Right, I'm just the average user. I open my email, and if it's, I want people to be able to send me unsigned emails. I mean, I may not say, "Ooh, I'm going to click on this," unless I know who it's from. I'm that smart, but I'm not smart enough not to open the email and see what the guy wrote me.
Just want to go back to JD has a point.
My comment on that is I really like PKI technology. I like encryption. I don't understand it, but a disturbing trend is I'm pretty sure it was like a real player. The last time I downloaded a real player update, the certificate that came back was an unknown certificate because companies aren't taking the time to go through the verification. So all you're going to see is, authenticated viruses. I mean, you're not going to be able to track it. And users, users and myself are annoyed by, dialog boxes and message boxes and say, yes, okay, click that. I don't want to do that, and other people don't either. So that, you're just going to become oblivious to if you have to check a bunch of boxes and say, yes, I approve that person. To me, I think it's problematic. I don't think it'll really work. And I see tons of hands going up, so this looks like a good topic.
Ray just mentioned signatures, and I want to add that it's really easy to change one signature in order to make another. So all this virus detection technology is somewhere lacking. I mean, you can change signature, make another, do the same, and it's a real problem to detect. Now, you can use other files as well to embed the code inside, not just the default extensions. So, again,
when I say signature, I'm not talking about the signature of the file itself. Even so, a virus detector would block it. I'm talking about a digital signature.
On the message itself.
On it, not even necessarily the message, but any script or anything like that that's running in the mail message.
Okay, so it's not the message itself, it's not like PGP sign,
No.
it's like the script itself that is being included is signed.
Exactly.
And if it's not signed, the interpreter won't execute it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right now, we're trying to block things like VB scripts, but people are getting smarter all the time with finding the extension that will run, and it's totally ridiculous to try to block it this way. So,
Just don't let the JavaScript
yeah,
runtime library fire up unless it's got a valid signature.
exactly.
There's one important thing that is currently being missed. If I execute code, malicious code coming in from my email, it acts on my behalf. And people will only use signature when they cache the passphrases on the smart card so that it's automated. So any mail born, a virus sent on my behalf will have my signature.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
I missed this.
So if he's logged in and his machine is compromised, or he's on a multi-user system or something, his machine's compromised, and the script starts firing off emails on his behalf, everything he generates will be signed with his valid signature.
It will.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically would be your responsibility as somebody who owns a signature. You laugh, but the thing is that when you sign something, for instance, in Microsoft, the signature is actually kept in a locked vault where two people must go forward with a special key card and biometrics and everything. And when they actually sign something, they go through this entire process of making sure that they go through 5 virus checks, and when you see it out there signed, that there is nothing wrong with it. And because you have a responsibility at that point, when you attach your name to it, you're saying that there's nothing wrong with it.
Oh, the other thing could be sort of like, when you PGP sign some messages, you can have it either keep your key valid in memory for 30 seconds, so if you're firing off a lot of emails, or you could just say it's only valid for the one-time use. And so you'd be sitting there typing in your passphrase every 2 seconds if you're sending out a lot of these things, but...
Is it when they're in the vault they put the flexing later?
I think so.
Go ahead and answer a question in the back. You've had your hand up a long time.
There's also the problem that companies like Real, makers of the Real player, are including things like Common Cursor, which grabs a lot of privacy compromising information.
I love
sends
Common
back
Cursor.
Sends it back to the marketing agencies. So you may trust an organization like the Real Audio Company, but they have slipped you essentially privacy malicious code.
Yeah, that's
Yes, but I'm addressing HTML and JavaScript exploits. Basically the question was, how do we protect ourselves from HTML exploits? And
yes, but this is essentially an issue of how do you trust the code that you're getting, be it, even if it's signed, you're receiving it from a trusted source, but they're
right.
including...
Yeah, my trick around that, and it only seems to work on this damn NT, is that I run an application where a little firewall from Symantec. They bought it from WRQ, and when I download the Real Player, it'll pop up a box and say, hey, Real Player is trying to connect to port 93 on this server out there somewhere. And I'm saying, why does my music player need to connect to the internet? And so I can block those connections, so at least I have some more control over what my applications are up to.
The latest version of Freedom has a free included personal firewall that does the same thing.
Yeah, and I haven't updated my Freedom server yet because I'm here. So, but I think you're gonna have to take like broad steps like that where you just have to block all outbound connections and authenticate each one.
And seriously, I don't think that you can block all outgoing connections. I mean, copy protection, especially with shareware, it's long been the fact that authors will connect to the HTTP port of their own server, send some key data and so on. I mean, I know anybody here using Qt FTP or anything like that, when it comes to things like that, there's a lot going on, and there's a lot that your firewall will not catch, because those programs will contact via port 80. They will use the Microsoft API for WinINet API or something like that to contact or send data. There really is no way to ensure that programs are not doing that. I mean, you can try to filter it, but once you're filtering it, you will risk that this program will not run anymore, because you're basically breaking the license agreement, because it's part of the license agreement that you agree to having them send data concerning the licensing schemes to their server. Yes, sir.
Some firewalls will do it on a per process basis, so the process name is tied to whether or not it can communicate on a given port. So you can say IE is allowed to talk out on port 80, but nothing else is.
Well, then rely on the programmer not opening another process and writing his code into there and then going from there. I mean, technically it's not a problem.
There's always another way around it. I mean,
Actually, the easiest would just be to send it down port 80 at that point.
Okay, sir, in the back.
Yeah, a little thing about PKE and how to trust it when having to do with HTML, you can have a new certificate of the object signing thing.
I'm sorry, could you speak up a little bit?
Yeah, you can have a new certificate for object signing installed in your Windows box by port 80. No personal firewall will have you have there. And afterwards you can install any software you want. You will only see this software comes from Microsoft, because the cert that signed the object that is going to be installed is signed by the certifying authority cert, and because that certificate cache is not protected by any password on Microsoft, you can poison it really, really easily. And the thing about PKI and having no privacy, you can have a privacy or an anonymous PKI certificate authority where only the NIM handle, or how they call it over there. It's just a sign on that this email address only occurs once in the cache. So if you build up a trust relationship to this email address, you can be sure that the next email is really coming from
I think the problems that they're talking about is, I was just at this NISSC show before I flew here. I told the story at lunch. People were talking about, I pointed out that the more authentication authorization you have, the less privacy. And they were saying, well, one model around that is that when you go online, you decide how much information you give away. And if I'm going to allow my connection to be direct to me through dial-up and not through, like, say, an anonymous server, then the grocery store might let me spend money there. If I go through the anonymous server, the grocery store might not trust me, and so they might let me look at the grocery but not buy any. And so now you can sort of, the e-commerce sites can now start making decisions about whether or not to trust you or not based on how much information you directly give to them. But sooner or later, the stores will only take connections from the most favorable people and ignore everybody that's anonymous.
Yeah, if you put that to the end, or if you put that thought to the end, you have then an e-commerce net where people can connect to if they have an IPsec connection, really come to that dial-up, where even the address is known to the site, and if you don't have that IPsec from your dial-up, you may not connect anyway. That's not the last point.
Speaking of IPsec, I want to ask everybody on the panel if they think that's going to help or hurt the current situation, either IPv6 or IPsec.
Jennifer?
I fear that IPsec is the devil. And that is exactly for the reason that I mentioned earlier, which is that I'm afraid that it, by technological standards, will do away with anonymity. If you can trace each hop back to its original source at every time, then you will always be able to find the person from whom the communication originated. And while that might not sound like such a bad thing when you're thinking about catching the person who stole $1 million or $10 million or whatever, it is a bad thing when you think about catching the person who sent out that email that was that was critical of the government or something of that nature. So I have a lot of fears about IP6 and IPsec, and I think that the normal average person, man on the street, doesn't really even think about the fact that the standards decisions that are being made now by a bunch of technical eggheads are ones which are going to have these far-reaching effects on our everyday, daily civil rights in terms of free speech and anonymity and that kind of thing. So I am afraid of IPsec, and I think that other people ought to be too. If I can only get normal people to be interested in IPsec and pay some attention to what it might do, that might be good. And I feel uncomfortable that the process by which standards decisions are made is one that is not inherently democratic, and one in which the lots of concerns don't get to be aired. And I think that there's a danger that technical people will look at technical standards and try to determine what's the technically best way to do it without taking political stuff into account. And I think that we've been really lucky till this point that many people who are involved in the technology fields also seem to have are very political and very smart, and sometimes have a strong streak of libertarianism in them. I'm no libertarian, but I think it helps us a lot that people at least have those concerns in mind when they're working on this stuff, but I don't think we can count on it. So IPsec may be the devil, that's what I think.
Well, concerning the stuff Jennifer just said, I think that IPsec might restrict anonymity to those who are technically very good, because seriously, those who know what they're doing, they can always bounce through a few other hosts to make a connection. It will probably stop the packet monkeys out there. It will probably stop some stupid American kid flooding down eBay. Or was he Canadian? Well, never mind. Anyways. What I'm trying to say is that there will be a certain level of anonymity for those who are technically capable of achieving it. But for the white masses, for everybody else, it will not exist. And that might be a danger of IPsec. But on the other hand, it's every security designer's dream. I mean, if you take the politics out of it. So,
don't do that. That's my point.
well, I'm not saying that it's a good thing to take away the anonymity for the masses, but you might have a problem. Most people in the security business you will be speaking to, let's say, well, what the heck with IPsec, I can always have anonymity because code is bad.
Right, so what'll happen then, it's sort of like the elite get the privacy and everybody else gets mass mailing instead of mailbox.
I suggest for everybody to read Bruce Schneier's paper about why PKI is a risk. We'll find some deep thoughts there. I don't like PKI because it can trace you back, and IPsec is the same. We do some stuff we don't wish that other people will know we've done that. Either we are doing legit stuff or not, and I think nobody has a right to limit our activities. If you think about internet idea, the idea of open source, the idea of full disclosure, this is all about expressing yourself with anonymity. So if you introduce a system or technology which takes it away, it's something that hurts those values we are standing for.
Anyone we want a question by the
Oh, wait, hold on.
Okay, wait. Ray's got
Do
a
you want
comment
to
here.
comment on this one? Okay, so I'm going to have to respectfully disagree with Jennifer and Ofir. I think there's a bit of demagoguery about IPsec. I mean, really what IPsec is about being able to establish protected connections. It's not even like necessarily the entire internet is going to be based on this IPsec protocol. It's based on, I have a particular connection that I want to make to eBay because I want to buy my dirty magazines for, protected wise. So I want to make sure that that's done correctly. That doesn't mean that when I post to news groups, I'm going to be using IPsec to make those posts. And also,
but at some point, can't that be mandated? The ISP will just say we only accept IPv6 connections.
you said IPsec. I mean,
I'm sorry. Right.
And also to address the IPv6 one. Now this is my personal opinion, but I don't see IPv6 being implemented anytime soon. The need has just gone down The big needs were based on A, routing tables, and B, address space. And both of those issues have been resolved for a decent amount of time, at least until we actually get appliances on the internet. And the actual cost involved into actually making IPv6 a reality is just stupendous. So I just don't see it happening.
JD, start that war.
Political issues aside, I mean, anonymity can be great to a certain point, but I mean, eventually, the buck has to stop, and anyone who, posts something anonymous to the web or make a political statement or something, it's not useful until you know who that person is, until that person identifies himself, for evidence. I mean, people, there's no such thing as, anonymous evidence. That has to be tracked and accounted for, and someone has to stand behind it. So I'm not so much worried about,
The founders of the United States, though, posted anonymously.
No, they signed. They put their lives on the stake.
No, they're writing the Federalist Papers. That was all under anonymous names.
Well, when it came down to it, they signed and they lost.
Well, but the people had an option. They had the option to remain anonymous. It wasn't that was their decision. It wasn't made for them.
Thomas Jefferson said democracy is dead without anonymity.
I
don't know about that.
There's just no fear in losing anonymity with IPsec or even with PKI. I mean, I just don't see a situation where even that kind of thing is even mandated. There's just too many transactions that happen that have to be done lightly. They can't be done with that kind of weight. So I mean, I personally am in favor, and I feel that I'll be able to be anonymous for time to come.
Okay, finally, gentleman in the aisle.
Yeah, one of the questions I've got here, I don't know how many people actually here saw our presentation at DevCon. If you missed it, to see it again. One of the actual attacks that we do when we're actually trying to penetrate a Lotus Notes network is if we're going after a case, say, in theory, espionage, and we want to go after the executive vice president or somebody of that type, we don't target him. We target the receptionist or his assistant, because that person usually has access to everything he's got in order to help manage his business. How would you see role-based security actually having any effect, if at all, and stopping hackers from getting in via those types of methods?
Ray has a wonderful theory on too much security. Ray spends his life bypassing Microsoft security because it's too pervasive.
Well, thanks for telling that story.
I have a small problem. I'm under NDA to him, so.
Well, so it was interesting. A good friend of mine, Jeremy Roush, told me that the problem that he had with security experts is that the bottom line is at the end of the day, the job is to get the job done. And when there's too much security, when you can't get your job done, the first thing you're going to do is try to figure out a way to bypass that security so that you can do your job. So internally, companies really need to take a look at their security. The idea needs to be that it's transparent to them, what the actual security aspect, and also the training needs to be necessary, that they'll actually be able to don't hand out the passwords, don't have their machines unlocked. And to be honest, though, it really feels like it's those people like the vice presidents that are the worst at security. Wasn't it the CIA director that had his information on the internet?
Yeah. Complete with the porn?
Yeah.
I don't have anything against that, though.
Secret information on the internet?
No.
Oh, okay.
On rule-based, I just think there's a higher level of administration, but if your organization can put up with the higher administration costs, sure, I think it's a good thing. I don't know of many role-based security models that people are using, though. I mean, you can sort of implement that in 2000, but not quite, right?
A little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. It's getting there. Sir?
Something completely different. We have been talking about real software sending data back to a server, queued FTP, and so on. I wanted to know the standing of the speakers about free software.
About free software as far as trusting it or using it, or?
With security concerns. Is it helping? Yes.
Is it open source?
Free software as free speech.
But you mean like the software is open source or closed source?
Free software is free as in free speech. So source available.
Oh.
I can change it. I can distribute it.
Can you give some examples of what you mean?
Well, like Linux is a free software.
Okay.
There is free software.
Joke.
Okay, so the question is if it will be more secure or what the state of security will be of that kind of software?
Please.
What's the question on the security
What do
side?
you think about free software, so
Oh, versus buying
open
from-
source in security concerns?
Okay, I don't think there's a lot of difference between free code, open source code security or closed source security. Generally, code is bad, really, really bad. There was some comment on client-side code being bad. My experience is coding is really bad all over, and it's only getting worse. To make a nice direction in the feeling on how security is going to be in the future, I have a bad feeling. I did a small survey in the dot bug. Everyone know what a dot bug is? It's the direction traversal bug. The reason I did it is some personal thing. I found one in '93 in the NFS server of Linux. So I did a survey on how many of these were found by looking at the CVE, the vulnerability, vulnerability environment by Nita. It's like a big database with descriptions of bugs. I found 59 entries describing dot bugs. So that's 59 over the last like 3-4 years. This year I came to like 23, 25 bugs that were found based on this principle. So it gives a bit of an impression of how many of these bugs are typed in every day now, while they were found like 10 years ago already. And there's no one learning anything. If we then look at all the housewives and history scholars being put to IT work today because we have this high demand, coding all our new WAP applications, there's no hope. Really.
Okay, this is my big can of worms. So I have a question for our legal. Jennifer, what's the atmosphere? What do you think of whatever happened with software companies accepting a lot more liability in their product in terms of the legal thing? When you sign a product that says we're selling you a product at $250, and we don't, whatever happens to your machine, it's not our fault for that.
Can I ask another question? We'll finish up this question first.
I don't know.
You know, the software companies have proven themselves to be very powerful and effective lobbyists, at least in the United States Congress and I'm sure elsewhere. So we haven't seen as quickly as I think some of us would like the extension of liability to them, or we haven't seen any kind of statutes which give any rights back to the consumer or anything like that. I do think we're going to see challenges of the shrink-wrap license and whether the shrink-wrap license can do what companies have been using it to do, which is basically to inoculate themselves completely from any kind of civil liability. You know, every product is sold with a warranty that the product will do what you say it's going to do, and if the product wrecks your machine or is so insecure that it opens you up to all these vulnerabilities, then I think that despite what the license might say, there are claims that people who use the software and who got screwed over can make against the company. I feel the same way about the copyright protections and other things like that that are in the license. But for some reason, we've been extremely slow to see that. There haven't been any real lawsuits against any vendors yet. And why is that? I'm not really sure. Whether it's the economics of it or whether the vendors just have sort of a stranglehold on the courts, or I have no idea why. But I do think we're going to see that, and I think we are going to have to see that because right now there just is simply not a lot of incentive for the vendors to make secure products, and the civil system is often where that incentive comes from.
I've got a question to follow up on that. You know, like if you go into a store and you're looking at a bicycle, for example, and there's a warranty on the bicycle, and you say to the salesman, I'm going to ride this bicycle down Mount St. Helens. And the salesman says, yeah, that's the bike you need. Now, isn't that a modification of warranty? and for a specific purpose. So no matter what the original warranty is, the salesperson is warranting that that is the bike for Mount St. Helens. So if you take the bike down Mount St. Helens and it blows up, isn't that, so if a salesperson tells you this software is the best software, it won't crash, and it does, isn't that a modification of the warranty?
I think in some ways it is, but really then your action is against the salesperson as opposed to against the company, so it doesn't really inspire the company itself to make any kind of secure software. It inspires the salesperson to be a little less hyperbolic the next time he decides to sell that bike. Of course, if I were the defense attorney in that case, I'd say you assumed the risk. But yeah, I think that's partially true. But what's happened is that all these lawyers for the vendors have made the shrink wrap license so complete that they basically, you're lucky you're not giving away your firstborn as well.
Incidentally, Toshiba about a year ago were sold out of court. I think they had to pay like $4 billion or something like that because of a problem they knew in their floppy disk controllers, some problem with the cyclic redundancy check or something, that wiped data on like 1 in a million disks, and they had to settle out of court for about $4 billion, I think the total was.
What, do you know the case name?
Sorry?
Do you know the case name?
Unfortunately, I don't know. I think it was out in Japan. And I thought that was going to precipitate, cases like this, vendors being held responsible. But as you said, nothing further really has happened since.
It settled with a rebate. It wasn't real money.
Right. Okay.
Oh, yeah, they offered like a $200 rebate for anybody who got stuck with one of these machines.
Well, I think it's the same issue where your warranty says that we're not liable for anything except to make sure that the disk we give you is working. So.
I think that the issue with this was they knew it was a problem for 9 years and didn't do anything to fix it.
Oh, it's like the Pinto of hard drives.
Yeah, Ford Firestone.
Yeah, the Ford Firestone. Yeah. Okay, move on to the next question, sir.
Yes. It's not exactly warranty, but it's about quality assurance. I heard that the US government has decided that all software it will buy, I think the deadline is next year, will have to be evaluated and certified. Do you think that such a process of evaluation and certification of software will help improving software in general?
I don't think so. I like to see...
Okay, let me repeat the question. It's basically, next year, you hear in the United States, certain programs can go under a certification process, so when you buy a program, it says certified by XYZ Corp. That kind of a thing, or gold seal of approval by the code assurance.
Common criteria evaluation.
Oh, common criteria. Oh, you have to submit to common criteria and pay a huge chunk of change to have your software evaluated. And then again, the evaluation for common criteria, I think, is more procedural than actual code assurance, isn't it?
It's kind of like the universal labs.
Yeah, well, it's the replacement for like the trusted model, the B1, B2.
Oh.
So it's like the universal, so you can compare systems across countries. Yeah.
The problem with evaluating the quality of closed source applications is always that it's incredibly time consuming and nobody can really pay for it. I mean, by the time you've read the complete disassembly of a program, you could have programmed it from scratch probably. And as such, the evaluation of such a product will look like you take the binary, you run it through object dump, you see whether it's going sprintf or SNprintf, and then you make a decision whether it's secure or not based on that. And I don't really see that that you can ever evaluate closed source software in a way you can evaluate open source software. So.
Oh, I think Ray has a comment on this about Microsoft code quality. And they actually have, they have a larger than normal number of people checking code quality. I think they have almost the highest industry average.
He's eager to comment.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure what, on our team we have, for instance, we have about a ratio of 5-to-1 quality assurance people to developers. And then there's like one of me. But, yeah, so we actually, most of our time now in development is actually spent on quality assurance. It's actually spent more time on that than actually development time. Basically,
and that's above industry average.
Yeah.
And so if they're still having trouble and they're way above industry average, I don't think it's a solvable problem.
Got a question for the panel about mobile code, and what do you feel about the direction it's taking and the risks associated with it?
Question is, what do we feel about mobile code and the future direction of mobile code and the risks associated?
I sat on a panel that was done by the Department of Defense, and they're doing a bunch of research on that. And the big problem now with mobile code is, on one aspect, it's really cool. I mean, it's definitely nice to be able to have personal agents that go out and get the best prices on stuff, report back to you. The problem is right now is nobody knows how to protect them in different process spaces. So in my mind, people have different opinions of agents. My definition of an agent is an actual piece of code that travels to another machine, dissolves over here, and actually travels from machine to machine. If it's not doing that, then in my mind, it's a query. And this machine may query, it may be a smart query based on what you do, but it doesn't travel. So with true mobile agents, nobody yet knows how to protect it in those different process spaces, so you have no guarantee that the agent, when it comes back to you, is actually the agent that you sent out or has the correct information. So people are working pretty diligently on that.
Question, David?
Yeah. Sorry. With more and more products coming on that provide more and more functionality, with things like Internet Information Service 5 coming with WebDAV enabled and stuff like that, and then you layer Exchange on top of that, Exchange 2000, and that just gives all bad users ability to upload to the web server and stuff like that. Surely, or in your opinion, yes or no, would it be best for the vendors to provide this functionality but have it turned off by default as opposed to having everything turned on? I mean, we've already seen WebDAV issues with Apache, Swis's version of Apache, and also Microsoft's Internet Information.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of products that fail closed or they start closed and you have to turn on the functionality.
Okay.
It's a yes or no. It's a yes or no.
Oh, I'm a huge fan of that. Absolutely think that's the best thing to do. Unfortunately, I don't run everything.
And I think, can we say it's a fairly universal, yeah. Okay, it's pretty much, you should be up here on this panel. Sir?
Just a comment on that as well, it's a great thing for security, it allows you to sell software.
Yep.
Yeah.
I know.
Sir? I know, I'm sorry, the fellow in the white shirt? Yeah.
Yeah, sort of related to the last point really, one of the big problems that large organisations have, well I think in my sense, particularly large organisations, is you have many systems out there and they tend to be installed with defaults, as we know, so then you end up adopting hardening guides, and then you have to get your sysadmins to go through all of that. What's the view in terms of having like a policy, a security policy sort of installed sort of option where when you install an operating system, instead of having just like, do you want everything off the CD kind of thing, you actually have the option saying, okay, I want this level of security, and then you can sort of,
It sounds a lot like group policy in Windows 2000.
Go ahead. Well, I'm working for a big client which has a policy which says everybody gets the same, and we have a security policy which is running on each computer. Everybody has the same stuff. You cannot save nothing. You can not do anything that is not allowed. Basically, we have a distributed system which replicates itself over several hours again and again. So you cannot bypass anything on our systems. So if you are a big company, go for trying to use distributed systems. Try to apply security policies. Try to understand if someone puts a computer on your network which shouldn't be there, or unplug a computer and put something else. Just monitor your network closely, because like the X-Files, you should not trust anybody.
So I think, sorry, I think I wasn't saying it. When I remember, say for example, if you install Solaris, it would be fantastic if there was options there to say, okay, here's 5 different security postures that you can have. You can have like total default wide open, and you can have this, that, or the other, and obviously different levels.
I know one operating system who makes that. Mandrake Linux has this option. It's been closed down pretty neatly. Did install that on another Linux operating systems or other operating system, if someone can comment on that.
Yeah. But what about getting the actual commercial vendors to buy into that. So,
Well, I mean, I think that's great. I think the problem is that there's not enough of us that feel that way. I mean, the reason why commercial vendors don't do this is because they don't see the demand. And they will do whatever the market demands of them. And if there is a huge demand for them to provide a version of their software that's locked down, then they'll do it.
Okay, I've got a question for the panel. I don't know if this is going to fly or not, but I'm going to ask each one, or each person, you know, what are your own, what operating system do you run, and what are your own little tricks for securing it? Anything at all?
I run Windows 95 and DOS. Oh no. I run Windows 2000 and I run Linux, usually Red Hat. And I have a script that I run on Linux that I use for locking things down. Basically, you know, taking away everything that's been SUID, stuff like that. Just all the really basic stuff. And actually, the way I run that one secure is I run it on an alpha box. So I never worry about somebody actually breaking it and understanding how to use it, because 90% of the people out there don't understand how to compile anything on alpha. With Windows 2000, I pretty much just shut all the ports down. I use IPsec filtering to shut IPsec on the personal firewall type stuff. Shut all the ports down and open up what I need. Oh, and I don't run any code. No clicking on links.
I actually don't have any security procedures. I hate them totally. I don't like spending my life running around trying to make sure everything's secure. I like leaving my house open. I like having my windows down so that my house isn't stale when I come home.
I got a new stereo the other day.
I'm kind of hoping that I'll get broken into so I can try out my new forensic kit. But there's a pretty cool firewall I have that doesn't allow any incoming ports, and that's kind of pretty much the extent of it. But I do PGP a lot of things, so if someone comes in, that's pretty safe. I mean,
I use Win2K as well, Linux, NetBSD. Basically, I'm testing all those systems for fingerprinting, so I'm using them all. I just filter all incoming connections because I have dial-up. Yeah. Don't run anything. Just simple as that.
Okay, I'm also a mixed Windows Linux user. What can I say? I did turn off all the scripting stuff in Outlook that I use. You only use that for the mail list stuff, and I can see much scripts going on there. One issue I thought of was the Solaris turning down. I saw a release of Sun, of a free toolkit for hardening your Solaris box, and I forgot the name. JSP or something?
Yeah, it's on the SANS website. There is a link there.
Okay. There are in total 3 packages that I know of. One is Titan, one is YASSP, yet another securing package or something, and then there's JASP from Sun. So I'm not sure about configurability, but apparently there's more and more interest in it.
I'm a Macintosh person. I saw some people with Macs out there. And I have a dial-up connection, so I don't worry too much about that. I have a PGP encrypted drive for my client files and for my email, which is how I'm trying to keep those separate, but otherwise I do nothing.
Well, before you scoff at Macintosh, anybody of you ever tried to write an exploit for a Mac, like on Mac OS? I don't know, but Mac OS is really obscure to me, and I haven't figured out how to use the debugger yet.
Have you ever actually tried to write an application for Macintosh?
I don't think I'm that masochist. Anyways, I'm running NT4 as Service Pack 6, but most of the time I spend my debugger anyways, and I spend offline anyways. So even if there was somebody attacking my box, you would be wondering why I'm hanging in kernel mode and nothing is coming back. Or all the sensitive stuff is PGP'd, so I think that should be pretty safe.
Okay, we're sort of at an impasse here. We can either go down and have booze, or we can continue on the track for a while and then go down and have booze when we want to. So, how about we ask, who wants to extend this by another 15 minutes? Anybody?